The most important date of China's 2017 political calendar has now been set, October the 18th. That's the date announced for the 19th National Congress of China's ruling Communist Party, a key gathering that takes place every 5 years. China's National Congress is expected to review its work and accomplishments over the past 5 years and forge an action plan to promote the development of the party while pushing forward with efforts to build a prosperous society. To discuss the potential of this gathering and the likely impacts of it, I'm very happy to be joined in the studio by Xu Qingduo, current affairs commentator from China Radio International, and Anna Tangen, author and columnist. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Gentlemen, everybody is talking about what should be the highlights or major issues on the agenda of the 19th National Congress of the CPC Central Committee. What are your thoughts, Xu?
Well, I think a lot of people are looking forward to the new national leadership team, the new team for the new leadership here. What kind of like a team we will have to lead the nation, to lead the party into the next 5 years. As China is at such a critical juncture, to basically we are fighting against the so-called like middle income trap, and to become moderately prosperous nation. And this is one of the goals we have set up and to achieve, to realize that goal. And also, of course, people are looking at what kind of new theories, new ideas behind the new team for the nation, at least for the next 5 years.
Anna?
Well, I think there's a couple things. How many people will be on the standing committee? Will it be 5 or will it be 7? And then the next issue, of course, is the 6th generation. Generally in China, it's understood that you cannot accede to the top post until you've had 5 years being on the standing committee. So I think a lot of people will be paying attention not only to this leadership group, but to potentially in the future. And I think this is very important. Now, obviously, with the people also comes direction. And I think the direction has been very strong these years. We'll see, I anticipate seeing a group that is very much in line with Xi Jinping's thoughts about going forward and how to do that. So I expect very little drama, but a lot of indications.
Compared with the previous administrations under Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, what do you think of the importance of having the core awareness about the leadership at the Central Committee, I mean the Standing Committee of the Politburo? Obviously, what Mr. Xi Jinping has been doing is very different from his predecessor, Hu Jintao, concentrating major powers in an effort to effectively and efficiently carry out the most important party lines. Mm-hmm. What do you think of his major approach?
Well, I think, obviously what's happening in China today has a clear signature of President Xi in terms of the fighting corruption, this tough policy against the corruption. Nobody is off limits. And there's no, where is the top level or bottom line? No, as long as you are violating the rule. There's a possibility you will be brought to justice, let's say. And also, you see the One Belt, One Road. This is a grand initiative, I would say, in terms of this country's economic development and also foreign policy. If you look at the military reform, all these new ideas, I think to give a lot of people this uplifting, this spirit, and also the confidence in this country. Not long ago, there's an Ipsos survey, international survey about different countries' people's prospect or confidence of their country. Like China is the most confident country. Like 87% of the respondents say they are very confident about their country.
I wonder if we can draw a parallel comparison, which I believe is very difficult, with what happened in the aftermath of General Tito's death concerning the way the former Yugoslav Federation was governed. It's what we call the collective leadership. Pretty soon that federation fell apart. Collective leadership has always been a big question mark, and the question for the rest of the world to look at at this defining moment about the future of the Communist Party of China, the largest of its kind in the world, is why we have this very effective and powerful concentration of the powers.
Well, I mean, when you start looking at political systems, the strongman politics is there. But the question is always divided between, is the strongman politics about the individual or is it about the country? And I think if you start looking at the reforms and everything that China is doing, clearly anti-poverty, anti-corruption, all right, financial stability, the whole Belt and Road Initiative, rule of law, all of these things point to a society that is trying to move at a, let us say, a collective pace, as opposed to just having a few up there. Now, obviously, there's still problems with the Gini index. There are very, very wealthy people and still poor people. But the government is trying to do that. So these are very powerful indications of where the leadership is going. So with that in mind, yes, I think it's okay to concentrate power. The trap, though, is how do you bring the next generations not only to embrace your ideas, but be strong enough to do the same? Because when you have very powerful leadership groups or an individual, it's hard to get powerful leaders coming up from behind them. So this will be a big test for Xi Jinping. I mean, in the corporate world, we always say your biggest test is not necessarily what you start and accomplish during your time, but what comes after you. What is the next step? How do you hand off? And I think, you know, we saw this with Deng Xiaoping. He made some very good choices and things have worked out well. So it'll be left to Xi to start on a blank slate with a new group of people and select leaders as they're going forward into the future.
And also it has something to do with previous years before Xi Jinping took office as this General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee. There was this belief like the decentralization and also the power somehow was shared between different organs or sections of the society. Then there's a problem, there's a saying of like the decree will never get out of Dongnanhai, the headquarters of the party.
That was a very popular joke.
Yeah, popular joke, but it indicates like there's a problem. So I think that's a response to that. You do see the constitutional power in the Central Committee in the very top here.
Yeah, but you absolutely have to. If you're going on to an anti-corruption campaign, which is targeting the people at the top, you cannot have a situation because everyone would just protect their own. And this is, in essence, what you had developing. There were multiple pyramids that were developed, and everyone thought that they were secure. But these pyramids were not working for the good of the people. They were generally working for the good of the pyramid, the power structure that they were at the top of.
You know, I was impressed by the first press briefing hosted by Premier Li Keqiang after he took office during the Liang Hui, the political season, NPC of CPPCC. He said, now we are entering into the deep waters of China's economic and political reform. It means we have to do whatever we can to break up the monopoly of interest groups. By interest groups, I believe, and I'm sure you will share my concern, this phrase in the Chinese political vocabulary carries a lot of implications about the legacy of the previous administrations, which may have become the most formidable force to prevent the implementation of a deep reform. So what do you think of the concerns of this generation of the Chinese leadership to break up the power grip of the interest groups?
Well, it's, on one hand, you have to do that. But on the other hand, every time you do that, you're putting in place an even larger pyramid. That means basically you're moving from multipolar to single pole. But this, and I agree with you, China is, despite its successes, is still in danger. It could backslide very easily. And I think there's a lot of concern about outside forces who are trying to do that. I mean, there's a perception here that the U.S., with its 200 bases surrounding the seas and things like this, is an active threat, that it could, in essence, strangle China if it was able to block resources coming in and then finished goods going out, value added. So there's a wrong push. I mean, the Belt and Road Initiative wasn't because China could easily move across the seas. It was a reaction to what they saw globally with the United States saying, look, we have to check China's rise. So at this point, there's a lot of feeling internally, the middle income trap, along with what they perceive as sometimes hostile, not actively hostile, but just saying, look, stay down, kind of attitude that the U.S. has towards China.
You know, a major approach employed by President Xi Jinping to handle the issue of low efficiency, the obstacles of major interest groups is to launch the anti-graft campaign. One after another, big fish or tigers have been singled out and they have been brought to justice on charges of corruption. But one of the major consequences, I believe, which are very devastating, is the low morale and inaction of government officials. And that starts to be a major threat to the effective implementation of the central policies that have been formulated at the Central Committee or the Standing Committee of the Politburo. What do you think of the impact of such a low morale? Because salaries have been cut by half, no extravagant dinners any longer. But of course, wives of these government officials are very, very happy. They say the health of their husbands, their habits have been protected. They say their prayers to President Xi Jinping, you have done a good job.
Less baijiu is good to your health, right?
Well,
less multi.
The truth is, if you're a government official, you would have 3 or 4 lunches where you were entertaining somebody. You'd go in and have to drink with each one of them. So you're drinking just tons during the day, and then at night you do the same thing over and over again, just to show warmth, to show welcomeness. I think is going to have great benefits for China going forward, because you have a group of people who are actually healthy. So many of the older groups, high incidence of diabetes and things like this, it could be related to the amount of drinking.
But again, the point of a low morale and inaction of the government officials, that's the allegation that we have heard many times.
That's right, they do. If you go to the regional government, meet the officials over there, they do have a complaint about this so tough a policy regulating their work and the lifestyle. They're not happy with that. But at the same time, if you ask them whether these regulations are right or wrong, they would say these are right. I think we should do that. I think there's an initial response of this passiveness toward such new regulations and tight regulations. I think it's about like a change of lifestyle. Ultimately, it's good to themselves, it's good to this nation. At the same time, it's not the only thing about this new lifestyle, let's say, for Chinese officials. It's also about the increase of salary. But I just wish we have a quicken to increase their salary to make sure they have a decent life while working really hard for the government, for the country.
Take a page from Singapore. I mean, there has to be a happy medium there where you can do this. I mean, basically, when Xi came in, he kind of lost its way. There was allegations of corruption. If you talk to a taxi cab driver and you mention the government, they would say dirty things, and then they would just scoff at it. Now you talk about the government, and they're very happy. They say, oh yes, we're very happy. They're taking care of this. So the party had to earn back the trust of the people, and unfortunately, that requires a purifying. You have to get rid of those elements that were bad. Are there side effects? Yes, but the question is, once you start getting rid of these people and people understand that you have to toe the line, perhaps then things can return to a quote new normal.
Well, to have the core awareness about the leadership at the Politburo Standing Committee, or to adopt a high-handed anti-graft campaign, these are the major approaches and the means to the end. Now let's look at the mandate of Mr. Xi Jinping in the next 5 years, or if you can review what he has done. Particularly at the very beginning of his taking office, he brought the whole team of the Standing Committee of the Politburo to the National Museum, and they stood in the section about the national rejuvenation.
Right.
And we were all watching 新闻联播, okay, and we were all impressed by his vow. His vow has been to rejuvenate China, because China has become the second biggest economy, the most powerful trading power. By the Western estimation, if not IMF, China will surpass the US economic total by the year 2030. Now, these statistics may have added to the self-inflation of the general population, but above all, reinforce the confidence of the collective leadership of the Standing Committee. So what do you think of the implications of looking at Xi Jinping's vow? We have never ever been so close to the point where the national rejuvenation will be a fact, and we have never been so close to the center stage of world economy and world politics.
And that's why I think he sees the anti-corruption campaign with such a priority. He basically wanted the whole party to stay fully alert. And he said that, the threat of corruption is about really the survival, the very survival of the party. And the party is the leading party, is the ruling party of the nation. If the party is healthy and also rejuvenated, and the nation will say be basically assured probably to get a step further or closer to the center of the world stage, or to the rightful place of China historically. And at this critical juncture, I think the country is lucky to have Mr. And with this ambition, with this historical view about where we are and where we want to go. This is very important. You need this vision, you need this leadership.
And to have the peaceful rise and peaceful development of China in the foreseeable future, one need to make sure, if not absolutely sure, that nothing will disrupt this process. For example, the latest standoff in Doklam between India and China, many people were surprised, particularly those in the West, that we got a peaceful and diplomatic solution to this very serious crisis between the two major economies in Asia. Do you view, as a foreigner, Anna, that China's vision to ensure peaceful development has contributed to a solution, diplomatic solution to the standoff?
Well, I think things like SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where you're bringing people in, and this idea of being inclusive, BRICS, all of these issues show that China is involved, wants to be not in this kind of corporate mentality where 51% rules or the majority rules, but in things where it's consensus, that we gather people together and what we can agree on will go forward. Now, China has some real issues out there in terms of its the peaceful rise narrative. One of them is North Korea, the other is the South China Sea. How you do these, Taiwan and things like that. You have a lot of international pressure. So China's going to have to think outside the box. Not let it be driven into this kind of you're the bad guy thing that a lot of people in the West want to see.
And I wonder if you agree with me, and Qingzhe, if you see eye to eye with me about this critical issue. The biggest threat comes from within, not from without. For example, the rise of ultranationalism, that could easily derail our peaceful development. After all, China shares border with 14 nations on the land, and then India is the biggest. And we don't forget we had the 1962 border clash, Cold War, and India is allegedly and has been allegedly taking China as the public enemy number one to revenge. That's the popular assumption. So what do you think of nationalism and its threat to the peaceful rise?
I tend to agree with you. I think the threat for big power like China, like the United States, is really from within. Nobody can beat you from outside. Right. Like the U.S., for example, no country can match the power of the U.S. Either it's military power, technology, soft power, economic power. Few countries can catch with the U.S. But if within there's a problem that could threaten the survival or the prosperity of this nation, China is in a similar position. So we have to really be careful.
Are you saying Donald Trump is the biggest threat from within?
You know where I stand on that. No, I completely agree. I mean, the issue is that we're being torn apart from inside because a lot of the ideological lines that were apparent post-World War II and then during the Cold War have disappeared. I mean, quite frankly, I find China more capitalistic than the U.S. All right, there's more socialism in the U.S. with different things, especially Europe, than in China. Yeah. So all of the lines have blurred, and that has resulted in this kind of people searching for simplistic answers, which aren't always the ones that are best for them. And that, together with technology, which is changing the labor landscape, is creating real problems. People feel left behind. They see the elites getting rich, and they see nothing for themselves.
Whatever the mandate or mission of President Xi Jinping at this defining moment about the future of China, the most important, I believe, everybody agrees, I have the full confidence, is the economy. The healthy development of the Chinese economy. That will be everything about the stability of the society and the popularity of the ruling party. So what do you think of the current challenges that China is facing?
Well, I think the challenges, of course, people talking about real estate, the market, and also talking about this debt issue with the Chinese enterprises. But I think we can overcome this problem, and actually we are in the process of overcoming those difficulties. The challenge is like for China is really about so the new things like a financial, the ability to manage this financial market. This is completely new to the Chinese, I believe, to the leadership and also to a lot of Chinese people. The financial market could be really volatile and could really affect the stable economic growth. And long term, I think the building of the rule of law is very important to this country. If you compare like Shanghai, if you want to build Shanghai into the financial hub of Asia or of the world, you have to have the rule of law.
Let me alert you to the focus of a very quick discussion about the Chinese economic performance. Previously, we've been discussing the relationship between the government and the market. Today, we also not only talk about reform of the SOE, for example, the reform of the mixed ownership of Unicom, one of the major 3 mobile carriers. We also look at the future of the non-public sector, which could solve up to 70% of the employment in the Chinese market. Today, however, some of the landmark figures are called into question, such as allegedly, those guys are the very symbolic figures of the Chinese non-public economy. One after another, their origin of the financing is perhaps stopped by the central banking, and so that means we are doing whatever we can to avert the alleged systematic financial risks to ensure soft landing. Now, perhaps the campaign to ensure such a soft landing starts actually from the abusive use of capital from the central bank. What do you think of the approach, the policy approach?
I think it's absolutely right. I mean, what you had was, if you were a state-owned enterprise or one of these guys, a big guy, you could get unlimited cheap credit, and with this, you go on spending sprees. But the irony is that small and medium-sized enterprises cannot get loans. They're forced to go into the shadow banking market where they're paying 25, 35% short-term rates just to get money to buy goods so that they can sell things and employ people. So this is an imbalance within the system. I don't know that it's going to be necessarily solved by the traditional banks, though. They have been very, very slow to react. It's also the way that they do it, it costs them 2,000 renminbi to make a decision about a small loan, or any loan for that matter, but average. And then you have electronic banking, and they've now authorized 10 of these electronic banks. These can do it with 2 renminbi, and they can do a microsecond versus 6 weeks, 2 months, where it might take somebody to get it. So this could have a real big change, because you're now allowing capital to get where you need it, where you just said, where the jobs are being created, and you're not preferentially giving it to these large entities. Now, it's a human factor. If I'm at a bank and I have a quota of 100 million, and you come in as an SOE and say, I want to borrow 100 million, done. All right, I'm done for the year. But to do that same 100 million at a million renminbi a time would
surprisingly,
be very difficult.
the economic growth rate in China was put at 6.7% against the expectation of the rest of the world, despite the shrinking of external orders for China's exports. What do you think of the driving force behind the rosy picture?
I think if you look at the Chinese economy, we are in the process of basically transforming this economic growth model from relying on export and investment driven to one that is driven more by consumption. I think you are transforming quite smoothly. You do see, if you look at Taobao, the retail business, there's a strong growth in people's consumption. The consumption power is amazing. If you look at Chinese people, the outbound tourists, the number of them is like 130 million people for last year, and they're spending, the biggest spender in the world. I think this is a huge market of consumption. As long as the process continues.
By the end of the day, Anna, I'm afraid we are all asking the same question about confidence of the consumers, confidence of the investors, confidence of the at different levels. Now, Premier Wen Jiabao once said, confidence is more expensive than gold. So what do you think of the where does the confidence actually come for the Chinese consumers and for those who still prefer to stay in the Chinese market?
Well, quite frankly, it's the management of the Chinese economy, and that is by the party. So as long as people have confidence that the party is able to do this and they're able to function, things will go well. But when you mention confidence, this is an interesting area, because there have been a lot of complaints that there's a lot of tamping down of any kind of complaints and things like this. And I think there's a very, very important line between constructive criticism and destructive criticism. Obviously, destructive criticism is aimed at unbalancing society or creating profit or benefits for a few above the many. But constructive criticism is very, very important and should be encouraged. The question is how you do it. The difficulty is when you're dealing with China and it's so large, it's very hard to have judgment calls. So they tend to go a little bit over the line.
Yeah, a level-headed Anna Tangen does point to the critical issue about criticism. Now, it seems that the broad spectrum of public opinions is currently quite divided about the issue of confidence, with one strong voice saying, hey, look at those who cast their vote with their feet. Now, look at the outbound flight of capital. Some of the successful entrepreneurs from small and medium-sized enterprises in the prosperous parts of China, for example, Jiangsu and Zhejiang, start to immigrate to industrial nations like the United States, not only for the education of their kids, but perhaps for the protection of their assets. What do you think of this part of the public opinion?
Well, I don't really see that as a big problem. I think, first of all, like migration is just a natural choice for a lot of people from different countries. If they see this particular city, particular country is suitable for me to spend my right of life, I have the financial ability, then I will move there probably. For people who love to stay, where they are, probably like me, I would stay here. I think I do have full confidence in this country, and I think remember how large the population is. Those emigrated to other countries is only a very small percentage. I would say that's a natural part of.
And this is an age of globalization, the free flow of human resources.
Enjoying more freedom.
Yeah, but not all these people are going there for innocent reasons. Some of them are trying to hide capital and things like this that they can't explain how they earned. No, I think of it as like a wave hitting the shore. A lot of water comes out, but then it goes back. Why? Because, quite frankly, if you're in the long run, are you going to invest in an economy that's growing at 6.7 or 2, less than 2%?
Now, gentlemen, by the conclusion of this very interesting interview, what do you think, very quickly, what do you think are the major challenges for President Xi Jinping in the next 5 years before the 20th National Congress?
I would say to ensure the economic growth, a stable economic growth is still the priority.
What about the external challenge?
Externally, it's countering whatever the uncertainty that is being created by people like Donald Trump. But I would say balanced growth of the economy.
Well, what about the U.S.-China relationship? The presidency of Donald Trump is now at the mercy of lawmakers in the D.C., and people have been talking about this every day, every passing hour on the U.S. media.
There has never been a time when so many people in a president's cabinet have contradicted him on air. I don't know what else you can say about
his own people.
His own people, his cabinet contradict him.
But President Xi
routinely.
Jinping said after he visited the Mar-a-Lago vacation in Florida that China has 1,000 reasons to develop a very good relationship with the United States, not a single reason to destroy this most important bilateral relationship in the 21st century. With that, we come to the end of this edition of Dialogue. I'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.